Hello, everybody. Good morning from my side. Greetings from Finland. I'm talking about computational analysis of cultural production. Thanks for this opportunity. I'm a computational scientist, and I will mainly focus on some computational, methodological, and conceptual problems that we encounter in metadata analysis and metadata research. And hopefully you get some ideas and inspiration from that little bit. Where do I change this? So we are doing this in the context of different projects. So two main projects that we are dealing with currently deal with music and literature. So James, who is sitting in the back, I think he is going to tell you more about this Open Music Europe project in the afternoon. So I'm not really going into that. The other is digital history for literature in Finland. And this research is based on bibliographic catalogs in Finland, Finnish national bibliography, and this, of course, relates closely to many of the talks this morning. But the common thing for both of these and other projects we work on is that they deal with a lot of structured data collections that we often, of course, call metadata. And the structured data collections are very nice material for statistical data analysis, which is my main research interest. And then we can transfer methodology across these different applications, and we can deal with similar techniques and similar methods across these different domains. So we need some conceptual approaches, and one common thing for the literature and music is that they are complex systems. And in our research, we deal with complex systems. One aspect of complex systems is they often form these kind of hat patterns where you have gradual increase or expansion of the system. Then there is kind of a peak and then gradual decline of the system. And for instance, this could be something you see in the popularity of a particular genre of literature or a particular genre of music. And this also is something you see in ecological or evolutionary theory. And in evolutionary theory, these are called hat patterns. And it actually has a name of Red Queen hypothesis. So very often systems only have this hat pattern when they come up and then ultimately go down. And it usually when you start to decline, there is no return back to the peak, except in some cases. And this is called a Red Queen hypothesis. And the mechanistic explanation of this is that once you reach the peak, let's say a popularity of a particular genre, you need to maintain this position actively. So there is competing genres coming, there is people's interest vary and so forth. So the system actually has to do a lot of work to keep in the position. And the Red Queen hypothesis comes from the Alice in Wonderland analogy, where the Red Queen has to says to Alice that she has to run twice as fast to keep in the same place. So this is a nice framework for studying these systems, and we recently wrote a perspective where we analyzed different systems from societies to languages, music genres, and industrial systems to describe these patterns and to discuss the mechanisms behind these in the different fields. So it's a multidisciplinary approach where we try to find the commonalities across the different fields. And this is also why I'm interested in looking at the music and literature at the same time. Anyway, back to the bibliographic catalogs. So bibliographic catalogs provide rich metadata for literature research, and this research potential of the catalogs has been recognized for decades, as many of you know. And with Mikko, who is sitting there on the left, we already a couple of years ago established this concept of bibliographic data science using British materials. And the idea is that although the research potential has been recognized for a long time now, what has changed relatively recently is our ability to automatically process this metadata and in very large scale harmonize, refine, enrich, and integrate different types of metadata. in order to then tackle actual research cases. So our ability to scale up these studies has been becoming more and more improved in the last years. And so we are taking advantage of the modern data science ecosystems in order to do better bibliographic metadata research. And from the bibliographic metadata, we can then draw different patterns, as I show shortly. So we mainly started with the British catalogs, and then we wanted to expand this to study Finnish literature in a consortium that now includes members from the National Library of Finland, and then Finnish researchers from University of Turku and University of Eastern Finland. And the idea is to focus on the 19th century, which is a critical time window for the development of the Finnish literature, and in particular on the forgotten works or less works that received less attention. Our particular focus is on fiction in the 19th century and also on the female authors. So of course, this is a subset of the whole national bibliography, but it of course also helps us to focus the research questions to particular set. So we need to bring together people from memory organizations and literature studies, and then also data science. And this is a 4-year project funded by Research Council of Finland. So for these case studies on the 19th century literature, we use indeed the data from the Finnish National Bibliography, Fennica, and then some complementary data sources that can be used to enrich this. And then our methodology is basically various techniques from the open data science. The Finnish National Bibliography altogether contains more than 1 million entries. The books are available since 1488. And there is more than 1 million books. And then there is also continuous serials, newspapers, and then there is maps and a lot of audiovisual and electronic materials. And all of this is included in larger Finna collection, which is national compilation of cultural heritage metadata. The Finna is interesting because it also includes, in addition to literature, it also includes Viola collection, which is national discography, which we have also started to look at. And these are openly available, so openly licensed and easy to retrieve. We have built some automated tools. There is R package, Finna R package, which allows you to retrieve the metadata automatically from the original sources. And this is highly standardized. It has been released in a GRAN repository, which ensures automated quality control and interoperability across the different systems. So building this standardized libraries for these tasks is part of the work that we do. So this is an earlier picture from our previous work with Mikko and others, where this just shows the timeline of the Finnish publishing activity between 1640 and 1917. And before we can get into this kind of timelines of literature, there is some harmonization work to do because the library catalogs seldom are ready to analyze and plot these figures, as many of you know. So we have to do a lot of refinement on the data before we can even draw such simple plots in a reliable way. We also need to address the gaps. We know, for instance, that here at the end of the 19th century, there is 20,000 titles missing that are focusing on this mainly Swedish literature. So these biases are something that are not in the data, but we can deal with when we have expertise from the National Library who know the collections. And when we refine this with other metadata, we can also look at the patterns, how the publishing landscape evolves. This is in my hometown, Turku. This is the different publishers over time, and you see that from the names that it often goes in the family. But even this requires a lot of harmonization before we can get into this, because the name forms often have many varieties. Okay, so in general, before we get into those analyses, we have to go through the data science workflow where we access the data, and then we tidy the data. We need to do quality control, we automate much of this to run automated plotting and automated analysis of the data to spot suspicious patterns and deal with them. The data refinement is an iterative process where we learn more about it. And then ultimately, once we are happy with the outcomes, we communicate the results. This is a classical data science workflow visualization, and we more or less follow this pattern. One aspect of this that we focus particularly is to make this as open as possible. So quite recently, I was leading a working group that developed a national policy on open research data and methods in Finland. And in particular, the research on SSH fields is a real challenge at the moment. There is well-established practices in technical natural science fields for open source code and open data. But then the research questions and settings are also quite different. So in SSH research, it's often more difficult also to open this in practice because the data sets are more unique, standardization is more difficult, and so forth. But this is important work to think about, and now this is something we think about in this context of this project. And the open source libraries that I already mentioned, the Finna, we actually build a compilation of open source libraries. So we have sets of R packages that are interoperable and follow similar data standards for the Fennica national bibliography, and then for the more broader national metadata collection. Then there is the Finto package, which provides access to the national ontologies that provide information about authors and other things that help us to enrich the data about the authors in the Fennica database. So we actually need combinations of libraries that helps us to analyze the data, and not only for accessing the data, but also for things like visualizing data on maps. So we have specific software libraries to visualize this data on the Finnish landscape. And this is, of course, something we need as well in order to provide the publication-ready figures. So this set of packages and tools then allows us to build the reproducible data science workflows. So one more problem that comes with this is that we, of course, have to integrate a lot of different types of data. Even integration of tabular dataset is a challenge in data science field. If you think about bibliographic data catalogs, the sample sizes are increasing when we start to combine different catalogs. We have increasing number of entries. Not only that, we often want to analyze increasing numbers of information fields, page counts, authors, places, languages, and other things. So we just keep on adding information. And then we have the spatiotemporal variation and resolution that we have to take into account. This varies. Then we may have alternative pipelines. We may actually have many different ways to process the data depending on what is our research task. So often there is no one correct way of harmonizing or refining or enriching the data. So we may have alternative pipelines. We may criticize these choices. We have hierarchies, like, let's say, genres often have subgenres. In geography, we have geographic subregions and so forth. So we have different hierarchies in the data, and then we can measure different things from the books or other works. For instance, the physical dimensions, but also virtual properties like for instance, the genre. And then sometimes we want to combine data across bibliographies. So there is a lot of heterogeneous data. So the question is how to organize all these heterogeneous data sets and how to build interoperable methods that help us to deal with this. One aspect from life sciences that we are now adopting is the idea of multi-assay data structures that allow us to integrate efficiently different types of data. So usually the starting point for statistical data analysis is a data matrix, and this is very generic structure, but just to give one example, you could imagine that on the rows you have different genres, and a given work is very seldom actually strict in one single genre, but you may have like belonging to different genres. It can be binary, it can be like either in the genre or not, or it can be continuous, especially from the modern machine learning pipelines. If we do automated annotations of the works, we can get continuous weights for the different types of genres. And so these would be the rows. So they are features for the works. And then on the columns, we would have different books, for instance. And then each cell in this matrix would tell how strongly each book is associated with each genre. This is a generic system, but this is just one example how you can apply. But then in order to interpret this, we also need background information about the books, who wrote them, where it was published, and what year, and so forth. So we have rich metadata about those books, and then we can have also rich metadata about the genres potentially. What do we know about these genres? And this may form hierarchies, so we actually can also incorporate phylogenetic relations that describe the hierarchies between the works and the genres. And there are other aspects of these data structures, but the idea is that when we can agree about these shared data standards, we can more efficiently build pipelines that utilize the whole ecosystem of existing tools. And this is a very common approach now in computational life sciences, and we are now exploring the utilization of this in the context of literature research. So what we have done so far, we have implemented as reproducible notebooks at the Finnish IT Center for Science, which hosts the Finnish supercomputing environments, and this allows us to deploy openly some of these resources. And the harmonization and refinement pipelines of the Fennica and soon some of the data analysis are available online. This is still system under development, but this is what we have is basically pushed there, and then it's available for others to adopt some best practices or tools. Of course, the one challenge in this kind of research is that many of the choices we have to make are quite specific to bibliography. I think this also came up already this morning. So one challenge compared to life sciences, for instance, is that our ability to generalize these tools across different bibliographies is much more limited because they are all unique in different ways. Anyway, we are exploring the boundaries of this and making open what we have, and then seeing where we can get from that. And Julia Matveva, some of you have met her, I think, is a key player in implementing this and doing the metadata research in our team. Then one recent thing that we did was to get started with looking at a subset selection problem. Often, if we want to analyze works from the 19th century fiction, for instance, of course, we have to identify what that fiction is. And then the more traditional way of doing this is that you manually select the works based on certain criteria, and then you go through the list, and you may add some other works or remove some works, but this is more or less a manual process. And we were curious to see to what extent we can automate this and to what extent we can actually retrieve the same subsets by using completely automated criteria versus complete manual curation. So this process contains different steps that we have in both cases. So the first starting point is to choose the particular time period that we are interested in, maybe subset to particular languages, in our case, Finnish and Swedish, and then use some annotation systems like Signum is one classification system that we utilize. So restrict our search to particular signums of interest. And then we can do this manually or automatically. And after we have this initial set, then we have some exclusion criteria. For instance, we exclude children's literature from the fiction. And then there is some other exclusion criteria. And ultimately, we enrich the data. For instance, we do analysis of the first editions, and we recognize the genres in more detail and so forth. And then we end up lists that have in the manual list, we have nearly 3,000 works for 19th century fiction. And then in the automated list, we have nearly 5,000 works. So they are not really the same. And that's interesting. When we look at this more closely, we notice that actually almost all the works in the manual list are in the automated list. But because the automated list is almost twice as large, there is a lot of so-called false positives, at least in the sense that the literature historians who manually curated this think about it. It also turns out that our literature historians wanted to include some works that were not at all in Fennico, but they identified otherwise. So that's potentially interesting. So the question is, where do these differences come from? And what are the works that are only in the manual list or only in the automated list? And we are now analyzing that more closely and writing a paper about it. And hopefully we can refine the automation of the harmonization workflow so well that it becomes more possible to select these subsets automatically. And of course, the promise of that is that we can make this process a little bit more transparent and reproducible, and then it's really based on very clearly defined criteria. So hopefully we could reduce the level of subjectivity. But of course, that might also be needed, and in practice, this is going to be a combination of the two. But we are interested in exploring to what extent we can make these converge when we just ensure the data quality. And this is, of course, the starting point for the analysis. Now we have been more or less going through all the hurdles with the data refinement, and we are starting to look at different Bayesian analysis of these, but this is ongoing work with the Fennico. This is an example from the British collections where we looked at female authors and pamphlets. Usually female authors publish less, but they also tend to publish different types of works. So in this analysis that we did, female authors publish more pamphlets, and then we wanted to ask if the lower publishing patterns are because of the author gender or because of the type of the work. And in this case, it turned out that it's actually the type of the work that matters more than the author gender. Anyway, the statistical data analysis is something that helps us to distinguish the different overlapping effects in the data, and that we are very keen on working now when the data is ready. So that's very briefly some ideas that we are working on now. And of course, I would like to thank the long-term collaborators and my consortium members and the funding. Yes, thank you.
Thank you all for your talk. Are there any questions?
I'm just interested, so you have a pipeline, and at the end of the pipeline, you have an enriched catalog. So, do you cooperate with the Finnish National Library to give them back this enrichment?
Yes, that's actually part of the project, and yeah, I was thinking if I should mention it already in the talk, but indeed, one part of the project is that when we spot different inconsistencies or potential errors in the original metadata, we have now continuous loop with the National Library, and we have continuously provided them with some lists of potential cases, and they have ended up correcting some of the errors in the original metadata. But of course, often it happens that there is a logical explanation for something we found, but we have been able to produce these lists, and it has been helpful in this sense that it has also led to some corrections. And at least we understand better the data than that we are dealing with, because they come back to us with the explanation why something was in a certain way, and we can refine pipelines accordingly.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you all. Martin?
I was interested about your rise and decline theory, and in the end, you did not include a chart showing us the rise and decline of
oh, yes.
Is that something you can find?
This is now something we are approaching with this probabilistic analysis, but this is unfortunately ongoing work, so we don't have ready-made pieces.
We might be able to help you with that. I hope you. Some ongoing work from the University of Amsterdam that I need to tell you about.
Okay, awesome.
So, if there is really no questions, so thank you all for your talk.